Hi everyone, and welcome to our first summary lecture. The truth is, I was thinking more about this. It's probably wrong to call them a summary lecture because I'm not really like summarizing everything that I kind of want you to know, and you might see that when you get to your worksheet. But what I do hope to do with these weekly summaries of something is, I guess it's more of a lecture. It's definitely a lecture. So we'll keep calling it summary lecture, but the whole point is what I hope to do is actually just narrow down some of the things that I think are more complicated with your readings, and hopefully give you a little bit more focus that will help you when you try to do your worksheet and answer some of those short answer and essay questions. So you had 3 readings this week, and I think the last two are pretty self-explanatory. They're both pop press. One of them is something that I wrote with a friend several years ago. There was a viral video going around that was kind of like, social media is bad and it's ruining our lives. And we're like, the academic research really doesn't like show that. So we wrote this nice little Scientific American blog that gave a bunch of reasons why the things that that viral video implied were wrong in our opinion. But like I said, I think it's pretty easy to digest, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. And the other one was a Pop Press article about why it may not be so easy to quit Facebook. You know, a lot of people are like, well, if you don't like Facebook and what Facebook is doing, you should just quit it. But, you know, social media like Facebook, not just social network sites, but all sorts of social media and technology have become so uh, instrumental in everything that we do in society that I think one of the points of the article is like, it's not so easy, and we really need to think about that. Um, in general, this whole unit this week is really focused around the idea of trying to question some of the negative um, narratives that we have about media and technology in our life. And um, literally every media and technology class that I teach, I try to start off with this because it's not that I don't think that there are negative things about social media and all sorts of computer mediated communication. I do think that there are, that it's very complicated and that there are a lot of negative things that come with the territory. But what I find is that when I teach these topics, most of my students already come into talking about social media as if it's something um, that should that they should feel guilty about spending so much time on, or that's having all of these like horrific consequences for society, and less is said about the good things that social media does. And actually, the truth is, even this week, your readings, it's not, the readings aren't necessarily focusing on the good of social media. I think we'll do that a little bit in the semester. They're more concerned with interrogating all of the negative assumptions that we have about using these technologies and how they impact us socially or physically, or whatever it is. So what I want to focus on is you were asked to read a book chapter by Dana Boyd, and she is a very, very famous researcher. She actually coined in academic terms like the definition of a social network um, site, which by the way, she doesn't call it a social networking site. Only some of these sites do we use for networking. Most of the time, we're not trying to connect with new people. We're actually you know, using social network sites to connect with people we already know. But anyway, that was her point like years ago. She actually left academia and she works for Microsoft now, or she does the last time I caught up with her, so to speak. Not like we have drinks together or anything, but the last time I like looked to see what she was doing. Anyway, she wrote this book a couple years ago, and it focuses on youth social media use. Okay, I know we're not focusing on youth, but I think all the things that she talks about in terms of the narrative that we have about how youth, like the millennials, are connected to their technology applies to everyone. So that's why I assigned this chapter, because I think she does a really good job of, like I said, interrogating the assumptions we have about our relationship with new media and technology. And the chapter you were supposed to read is on the concept of addiction, okay? So we use that word a lot, right? Like we kind of throw it around. I mean, what is an addiction? Normally we think of some sort of chemical dependence, right? So people can have alcohol addictions and drug addictions and gambling addictions, right, where, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but we get some sort of um, our brains get in kind of a loop of experiencing some sort of neurochemical that makes us want to keep doing things, and it makes it harder to stop. And when we withdraw, right, from doing whatever activity, um, it hurts our brain, right? We have like physiological dependence to certain types of activities and chemicals and things like that, yada, yada, yada. Again, I don't care if you know what addiction is. What I want to talk about, though, and what this chapter is about, is like, what does it mean when we say somebody's addicted to their computer or addicted to social media, right? Boyd talks about this narrative in terms of what it implies about the activity itself, right? If somebody, we say, is addicted to social media, it means that they lack some sort of control. It means that they can't help themselves, and that they have poor impulse control and they need something, right, in order to function. And it's kind of insulting if you think about it, right? If you say somebody's addicted to something, okay, it's like slang for I really, really like something, but it also has this negative connotation of like they are out of control. And so we use that, and especially when we talk about our teenagers, right? They're addicted, right? It's something to be concerned about. It's something that we need to save them from because they clearly can't help themselves since they have no impulse control. But she brings up the point that like a lot of things that we apply like the term addiction to, like I'm addicted to. Well, she uses one of her examples was I'm addicted to tennis. I'm addicted to chickens, right? Because I got chickens, right? And a lot of people were like, I'm addicted to chickens. I can't stop buying chickens. We kind of understand though that like you can't really have a chicken addiction, right? I mean, look, there are disorders out there, hoarding and whatnot, right, where people do actually have some sort of like mental illness that makes them act in compulsive ways. But most of the time when we use that term, we're actually using it to describe something that people like doing. And she talks about this concept of having like a flow state. Like, have you ever had the experience of doing something you like doing and you become immersed in it so much so that time kind of passes you by? So maybe like it's often used to explain people's experience when they're good with an instrument, right? They could be playing piano and they kind of get swept up and so engrossed in what they're doing that they don't even realize how much time has slipped by. They're so into it, and they don't. It's not that they are addicted, right? That they can't stop doing it. They don't want to stop doing it. They're in a flow state, and sometimes I think this is when runners describe runner's high, right? That's kind of like a flow state. It's not an addiction. It may affect us physically, right, because we're getting pleasure from it. But it doesn't suggest that we have any sort of um, lack of impulse control. It just suggests that we're really into something. So she really questions, why can't that be the narrative that we have when people are surfing the net and communicating with their friends and doing things like that, right? Why do we have this narrative that when people check their phone a lot, right, it means they're addicted? Now, sometimes, right, our phones get a bad rap because not just because people might be compulsively checking them. And again, I just want to reemphasize that I am not saying that there aren't some compulsive behaviors that are associated with our technologies and things like that. I'm just saying we use addiction to describe all of these things when that doesn't necessarily seem entirely fair. I am on the same page as Boyd with this. Wait, sorry, lost my train of thought. Ironically, because I was like looking at my notes and now I lost it. Okay, so one of the actually some of the research has found that with teens in particular, because like I said, a lot of this focuses around teens because we're concerned about the babies and their addictions and we want to protect them and yada yada yada. A lot of the research has actually found that when teens are checking their phone and going on social network sites all the time, right? They're not they're actually connecting with other human beings, right? It's not that we are using these technologies to disconnect. Although I do realize that a lot of these technologies, social media technologies, mobile phones, computers, whatever, get a bad reputation because people don't like that when we are using them, we are often ignoring people who we should be communicating with face to face. And what I would argue to that, I don't think Boyd gets into this in her book, is that that's an etiquette issue, right? I always talk about how when I was growing up, my parents used to think that call waiting was rude. I'm not. Maybe they still do actually, but we couldn't have call waiting in the house because my parents are like, well, why would you interrupt a phone conversation you're having with somebody else just to tap in to get somebody else's phone? Oh my gosh, I'm like, I do know how a phone works, I swear. No, but the point is, why would you click over, right, to talk to somebody else when you're already in the middle of talking to somebody else? That's rude. And actually, I mean, I think they have a point. Now, society's changed a little bit, and I think our norms have changed where usually, unless you're like in the middle of a job interview or something like that, it's not necessarily considered rude if you've got a friend on one end of the line to say like, hey, hold on for a second, let me just click over and see who this is, right? Or maybe nowadays we've got, we can see who people are, so we're like, hold on, so-and-so is calling, let me just click over, I'll be right back. Whatever, we do that as kind of, it's part of our social norms now. And I would argue that over time we're going to develop social norms around, these things too. This is my cell phone with Jeff Goldblum and dinosaurs on it. Isn't that nice? Isn't that unbelievable? I found that. Anyway, we just haven't yet. So there's a difference between saying something's rude versus something's pathological, I think is the point I'm trying to make. And I think Dana Boyd would agree with me. Okay, but here's the part that will hopefully help you a little bit with your worksheet. She gives a lot of, they are intertwined, and I do admit this. She gives a lot of intertwined reasons that kids seem addicted, sorry, air quotes on addicted, why they seem addicted to their technology, and why it seems like they might use it sort of obsessively, right, in a way that we might want to apply that term to them. And I'm going to be pretty accepting on what you put in your worksheet so long as you have relatively distinct reasons. I would say, I guess for me, the overarching reasons, and she kind of organized the chapter like this, is one of the reasons teens are always using social media. And when we say social media, it could be texting people, looking at their phone, checking Snapchat or Instagram, whatever they're doing, right? They're always using technology, is because they need to be social. And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, right, I think the narrative that we are addicted to the phone makes us forget what's on the other end of this phone, right? It's a smartphone. So I can use it to talk to people and connect with them that way. I can use it to text with people. I can use it to play games with people. I can use it to see what other people are up to in social network sites. But the point I'm trying to make is a lot of the uses that we have for these technologies are social. In teens, we're all social. We're humans, right? We want to connect with other people. We want to see what other people are doing. It's in our nature. Teens in particular. When I was growing up or whatever, when I was growing up, I was obsessed with talking on the phone. I would stay in my room for hours and hours and hours without call waiting, which again, that caused some problems, some friction with my parents. But all I wanted to do when I wasn't with my friends in person was talk to them on the phone when I got home. I didn't have the internet. Right? So this was my way of connecting. Did people say I was addicted to the phone? Maybe, but developmentally it seemed appropriate. So the question is why isn't it also developmentally appropriate when, for instance, teens want to spend long hours and hours and hours playing video games with each other, right? It's actually pretty normal if you think about it in that way. So they need to be social, and technology allows them to do it. But another reason we need to keep in mind is that there are things that stand in their way from being social, right? So you could say, well, okay, fine, teens need to be social. Why don't they just go hang out with their friends? Well, parents are why. No, I can't say it's all parents, but I do think that there has been a shift in parenting culture that actually, if you read other chapters from that book that Dana Boyd wrote, she addresses this you know, various detail in different chapters, but the general message is like, you know, parenting culture has changed. What it's like to grow up has changed. It used to be that if you ever heard the term free range kids, right? That kids were allowed to wander the neighborhood, right? Stay out until like it got dark and whatever. You don't see those types of things happening that much more. On the flip side, right? Children tend to be heavily scheduled, right, with extracurricular activities. They don't have a lot of as much personal time to just go and get into trouble, so to speak. Um, there is, you know, lots of things that I think have motivated this, which is a whole sociological study in itself. But again, connecting the dots with the two things we've talked about here, teens and young adults, and you know, use a lot of social media. Yes, they're doing it because they want to connect with their friends. Why can't they connect with their friends not using this? Because normally they're not allowed to, right? There are restrictions placed on that. They're either overscheduled or they've got some sort of curfew. I mean, you know, I heard somebody, it was actually on a show I was watching where they were like, in my day, my mom used to tell me to get out of the house, right? And now, like, there's more of a push for parents to keep kids in the house. So there's kind of a paradox here where I think that adults are very concerned about the amount of time that young adults spend on their machines, right, their computers or whatever, and at the same time, you know, adult culture is kind of also keeping them inside, or the only way that they can like reach out is through technology. Um, and then finally, right, another thing she brings up is another reason is that these online experiences also it's kind of related to the fact that they don't have any freedoms. It gives young adults a lot of autonomy and a sense of agency that they wouldn't have ordinarily, right? It gives them a space to develop their identities, which again is normal developmentally, to try on different identities and show off different. I was going to say branding because we're going to talk about that a lot later on in class, but to experiment with different sides of themselves and do all sorts of things that, by the way, they do offline too, when they wear a certain shirt or they go through their country phase and their rap music phase and all these different phases, right? All of these things are things that they can also do in online spaces as well. So it's only natural that they would want to gravitate to the technologies. So I guess in sum, right, Boyd's whole point is that when we say that people are addicted to technology, we, you know, use that, we're saying that very pejoratively, and I think it gives people a sense that there's something wrong with it, and I think she's trying to push back, or at least that's how I'm interpreting it, because I'm trying to push back against the assumption that our use of social media is always some sort of detrimental, that we always need to be working towards a way to reduce it. And again, I'm not going so far to say that there aren't good reasons to sometimes engage in social media less, and there's not some negative things that can come out of our use of different social media and different contexts and all that stuff. I'm really not saying that. I am just asking us to think more critically about why our knee-jerk reaction is always to think negatively about these technologies, and hoping that the more we have conversations like this, one-sided conversations, or only I'm talking, the more we can think more critically about what's really good and what's really bad about these things, instead of just making a blanket statement that all of these things are negative. So that's it. I hope this was somewhat helpful. Okay, until next time. Bye.